Kia ora, and welcome to another video in the series aimed at teaching you how to play Riftbound step by step. In today's video, we're going to be revisiting the random wheel of decks, and without further ado, let us get into it. You'll have noticed there are going to be a few upgrades in this video today, mostly around quality of life and clarity for you, because I understand that while not everyone is going to be watching it on their phone, for those of you that do, there will be a few things that will just make it a bit easier. But without further ado, let us spin the wheel. So the first deck that we are going to be reviewing today is... oh, it is going to be a Jinx deck. It is in fact going to be the Zuma Jinx, testing Vendetta. And we shall remove that now and move on to deck number 2. Who will they be versing? They're going to be versing Kha'Zix. Now this is I know off the top of my head, this is the deck by McClure. The Jinx deck is made by a person called Chet. Both of those will be linked in the description below. Now let us remove that. Let us now move over to the mulligan and sideboard. One moment. Where's the other one I'm after? Sorry. There we are. Now if we move over to the mulligan, there we are. We can see that the opponent, who was it? Was Kha'Zix Tech by McClure. I am not going to go over the sideboards in this moment, but I will be talking about the decks themselves. The Jinx one is going to be focusing on the red Jinx rather than the purple Jinx. They're going to have a few gear, but nothing incredible. They've got a few of the regulars. The main introductions are Perfect Execution, Winds and Ghosts, and the Z from the Shadows. But overall, we're going to learn what the... Punching Poru, which is a kicking punching Poru. We're going to assume it's because he has short arms. But we're going to be reviewing this as we play the game. I don't want many spoilers because that is not as fun if we're not learning as we go. And I'm just going to assume Zorn Warrens. Now over to the Kha'Zix. They've got orange instead of purple. We've got a few experience creators. It looks like this might just be your regular... oh, Renekton. Very exciting. It looks a little bit like it's going to be a bit more of just a hyper-aggressive Kha'Zix. Well, let's go Star Spring, actually, for the game 1. The Kha'Zix will decide to go first, and we'll do the mulligan. That's a pretty good opening hand for the Jinx, because they can play the Travelling Merchant and then discard the Travelling Merchant the next turn they move it. As for the Kha'Zix, they're going second. The Nidalee not a bad idea. The Pike, not a bad idea either, but we'll see how it goes. We'll keep that hand. We're going to learn as we go, and let us head over to the spectator screen. We're now going to show the hidden cards. And without further ado, it is the Kha'Zix's turn. I, for some reason, forgot they were going first. Oops. They will be passing their turn 1, unfortunately for them. That is a mistake you don't often make over the board, mostly because you just asked. As for the Jinx, she will begin by tapping 2 for the Travelling Merchant, and pass. That could have been a turn 1 Jinx Demolitionist with the Seal of Rage, but there's no real reason to accelerate her. Like, she wouldn't be accelerated out. There's no real reason because there's currently no units on the opponent, so we're not really interested in the Assault. Nor are we interested in discarding 2 of these cards. So there's a multitude of reasons, but that's a good number of them. The Kha'Zix will tap 3 to play out a Pike Returned. Now Pike is the interesting one where it has backline, which is opposite of tank. And has once each turn, when an enemy unit dies while I'm at a battlefield, play a gold gear token exhausted. Very powerful, especially because if he's revealed from hidden, it can be quite a bit of a swing on the tempo. It is now over to the Jinx, who will begin by moving their Travelling Merchant and triggering the move ability of when I move, discard 1, then draw 1. We're going to see one of the 3 Travelling Merchants we've now seen out of their hand occur. And a showdown will now occur. The Jinx is going to pass priority, and the Kha'Zix is going to tap 1 in order to play Gust. Now, Gust says return a unit at a battlefield with 3 might or less to its owner's hand. It is going to target the Travelling Merchant, and there is no response from the Jinx, and as such, that Travelling Merchant will go back to hand, and that Gust will resolve. The Jinx will now, for 1-2, play out the Travelling Merchant again, and then for 2 more, they will be playing out the Noxus Hopeful, because the Noxus Hopeful's cost is reduced by 2 when you play another card this turn. With 1 rune remaining, they will be passing enough for Gust of their own. It is now the Kha'Zix's turn, in which they will begin by moving their Pike returned over to the Star Spring, and we're actually going to see them pass priority and the exact same thing occur, in which the Gust is going to be used to target the Pike, and the Pike will be returned to hand. Once that has occurred, for 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1 purple, a Kha'Zix mutating horror will come out, which is a unit that can be played at ambush speed, but of the units currently in the hand, the Nidalee, while it is strong, is a much better played unit from ambush stage, while Kha'Zix likes to be able to pick his battles between these two. That was really the only choice. We don't want to see the Rengar come out, and the Fizz would be quite useless. Spoils of War, by the way, is an Origins spell that you might not have ever seen. It is reaction speed, and it says if an enemy unit has died this turn, this costs 2 less, draw 2. It is it doesn't see a lot of play because not many people saw there being benefit in it over alternative draw options, or just the fact that Purple Orange at the time was more interested in alternative methods of combat such as Aurora. But now we're seeing it here, and it's really fascinating. I'll be interested to see what occurs from this. But it is now going to be a pass of the turn over to the Jinx, who has drawn a Wind and Ghosts, which is choose a unit at a battlefield. If it has 3 might or less, banish it. Otherwise, return it to its owner's hand. Now, that second part is really important, and a lot of people forget about it because while Wind and Ghosts does banish at 3 might or less, it is effectively for the same cost as a Starcrossed, half the value of a Starcrossed. Many people have said it is a rebuke but better because it's for 1 less power but 1 extra energy, does the same effect. And other people are just saying it's a nice middle ground, it provides alternatives and also at the same time provides more methods of returning things to people's hands for purple, which they definitely didn't have too many of. But it is now the Jinx's turn. They're going to move their Travelling Merchant over to the Zorn Warrens and trigger the move ability, discarding a Travelling Merchant and drawing into their signature spell, Super Mega Death Rocket. 4 energy, 1 power spell, deal 5 damage to a unit. When you conquer, you may discard 1 to return this from your trash to your hand. So right now, the Jinx could spend 4, recycle 1, in order to Super Mega Death Rocket the Kha'Zix, and then if they were to conquer the Star Spring, they would be able to discard 1 from their hand in order to return it from the trash. But to resolve, the Jinx is going to pass priority over to the Kha'Zix, who is going to pass priority, and that way the Jinx will be scoring to 1 point, as you can see below me. I've moved the points just so it's a bit more clear, and hopefully will remind me not to forget to award people points. Here's hoping. Then they will trigger the Conquer effect of discard 1, draw 1, and we're going to see the Punching Power discarded and drawn. While we could discard the Super Mega Death Rocket, we're somewhat tempted to play it this turn prior to moving in. And as such, we're not too prepared to get rid of it just yet. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to play a seal by recycling 1 Fury Rune, so we've now got 4 energy, and this comes in ready, and we're going to exhaust that to create 1 power. We're then going to Super Mega Death Rocket on the Kha'Zix, and there is no response from the Kha'Zix at this stage, and so the Kha'Zix Mutating Horror will die. The Super Mega Death Rocket will go to trash, and then the Noxus Hopeful will move to the Star Spring and pass priority, in which the Kha'Zix will respond by tapping to recycling 1 to play Spoils of War, and because a unit died this turn, an enemy unit hasn't died this turn, so they don't get to do that. That is my apologies. I read that as a unit, not enemy unit. So no, they can't do that. Instead, they'll just pass priority, and the Jinx will score to 2, and then they will pass. It is now the Kha'Zix's turn, and they will begin by, for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, recycle 1. They will be playing Rengar Trophy Hunter to the Noxus Hopeful battlefield. And the Jinx and the Rengar will pass priority. Sorry, the Kha'Zix will pass priority, who is using the Rengar. The Jinx will tap 3, recycle 1 in order to play a Wind of Ghosts, not banishing the unit, but instead returning it to their owner's hand. The Kha'Zix will unfortunately have to let that occur, and that will resolve with the Jinx maintaining control of this battlefield. And then for 1, they will be playing out a Gust onto the Travelling Merchant, returning it to the Jinx's hand and passing turn. It is now the Jinx's turn. They score 2, 3 for holding the Star Spring with the Noxus Hopeful. And then for 1, 2, 3, and 1 Power Rune, they will put Jinx on the chain and then pay the additional Fury Rune and recycle it in order to have her enter ready. She will then, at accelerated speed, move over to the Zorn Warrens. When you play me, you have to discard 2, so she's going to choose to discard the Travelling Merchant and the Treasure Hunter. And then she'll pass priority over to the Kha'Zix, who is going to have no options, and therefore the Jinx will conquer, scoring to 4 this turn, and trigger the Zorn Warrens, discarding the Wind and Ghosts, and drawing 1 into another seal. They will then move the Noxus Hopeful back from that battlefield and pass. There was a world in which we could have played Wind and Ghosts to return the Noxus Hopeful to our hand, but at this stage it doesn't really hurt either way, and keeping the Noxus Hopeful at battlefield at base is better than playing it and then having to play it next turn anyway. But it is now the Kha'Zix's turn. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, recycle 1. They're going to play Rengar to the battlefield of Zorn Warrens, and the Jinx Demolitionist at 4 cannot beat the Rengar at 6. As such, the Jinx is now going to die. The Rengar will have conquered, which will give, because there was a combat, Kha'Zix experience, their first experience of the game. That will go to 1. The big number, not the number underneath, is what we'll use to keep track of it. I will put that to 0 so we can see that it is in fact, doesn't matter. They won a point, so they conquer, and now they must discard and draw. They are going to discard 1 Fizz and draw 1. They draw into another Rengar Trophy Hunter. Then they're going to spend that 1 experience in order to buff their Rengar, putting them up to 7 this turn, or for the rest until that buff disappears. And then they will tap 2, recycle 1 in order to play Spoils of War, because the Jinx died, only costs 2, and they will draw 2. With their last remaining rune, they will recycle 1 in order to hide the Pike returned. You can see if we hide it, it is hidden. They are going to hide a Pike returned to this battlefield and pass. It is now the Jinx's turn. Because they, at beginning phase, only had 1 or fewer cards, they get to draw an additional card at the beginning phase. They will now begin by moving their Noxus Hopeful into the Star Spring, in which there will be no response from the Kha'Zix. They will score to 5. They will then tap 1 seal in order to play another seal. And they are going to, because they've got 2 options here, they could play the Flame Chompers to this battlefield in order to bring the Noxus Hopeful back. They could ride the Wind, the Noxus Hopeful back here. Or they could just leave it as is, but 1, 2, 3, they're going to play the Flame Chompers to base, so they only have 1 card in hand, and a defensive opportunity if necessary, if the Kha'Zix has a way to gank over. Or on the off chance that they have another Rengar Trophy Hunter in their hand. But they now pass at 5 points, and the Kha'Zix will score to 2 points. Then, the first thing they will do is they will reveal the pike returned, so you can now see that it has flipped over, and it has the ability, as I mentioned earlier, that when an enemy unit dies while they're at a battlefield, regardless if it's at the same battlefield as them, they will play a gold to get token exhausted. The next thing at 7 runes is for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and recycle one. We'll see a Rengar Trophy Hunter played to the Star Spring, and the Noxus Hopeful is now under very dangerous conditions. The Kha'Zix will now pass priority over to the Jinx, who has two options: let it die or use Ride the Wind. They're going to use Ride the Wind because it doesn't hurt them and it saves them losing the unit. It will move back to base. Well, actually, before that occurs, they announce that they'll be using it on the Noxus Hopeful, and the Kha'Zix has the opportunity to play Hard Bargain to make them spend 2 more runes, but because they've got 3 extra runes, this would be ineffective, and because there's no other cards, they're not worried about the Jinx having an additional potential spell. So this is going to resolve with the Noxus Hopeful moving back to base, and the Kha'Zix scoring 2-3, and because they won a combat, they will get an additional point. Oh, an experience, sorry. They will now, because there was no death, the pike did not see any death, they are going to bring the pike back from that battlefield. They are going to keep their Rengar, however, there. And then they're going to spend that 1 experience and exhaust the Kha'Zix in order to create a buff on the other Rengar. And they are going to pass. It is now the Jinx's turn. They draw an additional card for the Loose Cannon effect. They will tap 2 in order to play a Punching Porro. Who has the effect discard 1 to empower. He would go up to 3. At the moment, there is 7 might here, but with the addition of the Ride the Wind, they can bring in an additional 2 might, meaning they have access to 9 might at current. They're also very mindful of the fact that while they would be able to conquer, they would lose all of these units, and it is very likely that alongside the pike there will be something else the opponent can do, let alone just the fact that the pike itself could kill the Punching Porro, because the Rengar would be able to kill the Flame Chompers for 3 and the Noxus Hopeful for 4, and the Rengar is currently a 7 because of the buff. This tells us, well, this tells the Jinx that while they could technically score themselves a point at the moment, if no ambush units are available for the Kha'Zix, they would immediately lose all of their units that they have built up, and they would put the Kha'Zix in a position just to score back next turn anyway. As such, the Jinx must unfortunately pass over to the Kha'Zix, who will score to 5. They will then move both of their Rangars away from the battlefields. Oops, sorry, before they do that actually, they will first play a Trophy Hunter to the Star Spring and not trigger the Star Spring's effect. They will then, for 2, play another Treasure Hunter to the Star Spring, triggering the effect of the Star Spring. Oh, actually, no, you're right. It's the first time, so no, they can't do that. It wouldn't work. So what they are going to do is they're going to pretend they play the Treasure Hunter base. The idea I was going for is the first time a player plays a non-token unit here each turn, that would have been the Treasure Hunter. They could have played the second Treasure Hunter in order to move the first Treasure Hunter, but that's 2 units and that doesn't work. So instead, they're going to play all of those units to the base. They are then for 1, 2, 3 recycle 1, bringing out their Nidalee cat form. They've not really, like, besides the Kha'Zix legend, chosen champion, they've not had many ways to actually develop their experience, and buffing the Rangars was very important in order to overcome certain thresholds. It is now going to be a passing the turn by the Kha'Zix, who lets the Jinx draw an additional card for only having 1 card in hand, and we see 2 units that are very nice to see. Zed from the Shadows. For 4 energy, 1 power, gain 4 might. You may discard 1 as an additional cost to pay me. When you play me. If you paid the additional cost, play a Shadow Clone unit token. Doesn't say where, just says play. So it could be to a battlefield you control or to base. The other unit is the 3 energy 2 might Pike Dockside Butcher. Can be played hidden, can gank, and says you may pay an additional power. You may pay a power as an additional cost, to play me. When you play me, if you paid the additional cost, ready me and give me +2 might this turn. What we are going to see is that they are going to move the Punching Poro to the Star Spring. There is going to be no response from the Kha'Zix, and so the Jinx will score to 6. Because they conquered, they now may discard a card in order to return the Super Mega Death Rocket to hand, which they will do by discarding the Ride the Wind. The Ride the Wind will be discarded, and to hand comes the Super Mega Death Rocket, which can deal 5 damage. At the moment, they're looking to most likely kill the Nidalee, or they could hold it, as they are aware that next turn the opponent must hold both battlefields, or at least one battlefield, in order to prevent the Jinx from winning next turn. With that in mind, we will not see the discard cost of the Z from the Shadows be used, as nice as it would be to then continue to discard the Super Mega Death Rocket. It may be very important, but what we will do is we will pay 1 seal in order to hide the Pike at this battlefield. As you can see, it is now hidden. And for 1, 2, 3, 4, and the seal, they will play the Z. While it is very enticing to discard the Super Mega Death Rocket, it may become very important next turn to keep it, because while the Shadow Clone would have an Assault 4, this is a flat 5. So it might be very, very valuable in keeping it. The other thing we could look at is obviously conquering over at this battlefield, but that A would discard and draw, but B would put us at 7, and the lucky number for us is 6, because we want to conquer both battlefields, not hold one. While there is a world where we could play the Z from the Shadows to the Star Spring alongside the Noxus Hopeful, and move the Flame Chompers to the Zorn Warrens after playing the Super Mega Death Rocket, there's... Actually, let's think about this for a second, now that I've said it out loud. We play the Z from the Shadows to the Star Spring instead. It would go here. We don't trigger the Star Spring's ability. We then move the Noxus Hopeful over here. Before we move the Flame Chompers, we fall 1, 2, 3, 4, recycle 1, and Super Mega Death Rocket the Nidalee. There is no response from the Kha'Zix, and the Nidalee will die. That will resolve. Then the Flame Chompers will conquer. They will first trigger the Zorn Warrens effect, but it is worth noting that the Super Mega Death Rocket is on Conqueror effect, and as such you would have to note whether you would like to put it on the chain, because we have no cards to discard. It cannot be placed on the chain, and as such we cannot Zorn Warrens for draw 1 and then discard this, because it does not technically exhaust on the chain. It's important to know those kind of things, because there was a combination of Warmog's armor and Monastery of Harana, which allowed you to on conquer buff the unit, and then Monastery of Harana would allow you to expend that buff in order to draw 1. But it was clarified in a ruling by Riftbound Riot Games that all things must exist prior to the chain in order for them to be placed on the chain. So because we did not have a card in hand, we had no card to discard, and therefore we cannot place the Conquer ability of the Super Mega Death Rocket on the chain to resolve later. But for 2, we now can play the Noxus Hopeful to this battlefield, and we will pass. It is now the Kha'Zix's turn, in which they will begin by 4, 1, 2, 3, recycle 1. They will play a Fizz, and the Fizz spell they will play is Gust. They will target the Flame Chompers with Gust, pushing the Flame Chompers back to hand. Then, looking at this battlefield, we've got 4, 8, 12, 14 known might. I will now note on this battlefield the existence of the 14 might. We don't know what this card is as the Kha'Zix. The obvious choices are hiddens, such as Tide Turner, Edge of Night, or Switcheroo. They haven't seen any existence of the red pike, and so it isn't going to be in their wheelhouse of things potential. So at the moment, they're really concerned about mostly it would be a switcheroo, but they were aware that no matter what they do, they could not get around the existence of the switcheroo, and so must consider one of this 2 might turning into a 7 might. To get around that, the easiest thing to do would be send in a similar might unit, such as a pike returned, into this battlefield to force the opponent to lose out the punching poro, which would mean that any might swings would be greatly reduced, and that is exactly what will happen, where the Rangar or the Kha'Zix will move the pike to returned in, passing priority, targeting the punching poro. The Jinx is going to consider where they would like to play the pike this turn at the moment, or wait, and they're going to say, I'll wait, and we'll allow this trade to go through. Now that the Kha'Zix is aware that if a Rangar was to be switcherooed, it would go from 7 to 4. It would still be a lot nicer than a 7 to 2 swing. There is a reduction of 2 might at this battlefield, bringing us to 12. The Kha'Zix has on hand 15, so just enough. Well, a bit more than enough. They also have the access to a Nidalee at ambush speed, and that is a 4 might, which may make the major difference if there is a switcheroo in play. As such, they are going to move both Rangars in order to begin this showdown immediately, going to 14 might. It is now 14 to 12. They are going to begin by passing priority. The reason they pass priority here is because they're on the winning side. They don't need to play cards. They know what the only card in the Jinx's hand is because they put it there. As such, the only thing that they do not currently know is whether or not this is a switcheroo, an Edge of Night, or a Tide Turner, or, as will be revealed currently, it is a Pike Dockside Butcher. The Jinx will recycle 1 rune in order to increase the Pike from 2 to 4 and ready it this turn, meaning that this went from a 14 to a 16 on behalf of the Jinx to the Kha'Zix's 14. They also technically played a unit here, so if they wish, they could return 1 unit from this battlefield, but they are also well aware that they kind of need to hold on at the moment. And if they remove this, there's nothing more that the Kha'Zix has to do, and they are quite concerned about that existence. At the moment, at least, they can kill both of these, so they will pass this. They will give up the trigger of the Star Spring. As such, the Kha'Zix will begin by tapping free recycling 1 in order to play a Nidalee. Nidalee is a 4 might, and therefore will increase them to 4 from 14 to 18 at this battlefield. And they have no other option really at this stage. Unfortunately for the Jinx, that does mean that they will be dying, but we need to now delegate the might. For the Jinx, it may seem very obvious that they'll want to kill the 2 Rangars, but it's also worth noting that the Nidalee, if they win combat, will draw a card for the Kha'Zix. And while that card may not be the most important thing at this stage, it is worth noting that there is a world in which they kill a Rangar and a Nidalee and leave the Rangar here, especially if there is a way for them to trigger the Star Spring, which obviously won't be this turn because the Nidalee was played here and they did not trigger it. So with that in mind, they know at least the Nidalee will stay here, unless there's a right wind in the Kha'Zix's hand. But at this stage, it does make more sense to kill these 2 units, and that's what they will do. As for the Kha'Zix, they know they can kill everything here, and as such, everything will die. The Kha'Zix will score to 6 and gain 1 experience for the Conquer, and a draw 1 for the Nidalee Conquer. Or combat 1, I should say. And they draw into Renekton Brute, which is an absolute terrifying unit. I got my I got an opportunity to play it in a sealed event only recently. He is a 5 energy 4 might unit that has the infinitely usable ability. Spend 1 energy, give me +1 might this turn. When my might becomes 10 or more, empower me. It is worth noting that empower is binary. It is either yes or no, which means that empower is not temporary, which means if you were to play him and then expend 6 more runes to spend 6 energy to increase his might by 6 up to 10, he will become empowered with deflect and ganking, which is very powerful, very, very powerful. But for the Kha'Zix in particular, they are very interested in what this means for their next turn conquering both battlefields. With that in mind, they will now, for 1/2, play out a Treasure Hunter 2 base. They will move the Treasure Hunter, creating a gold token exhausted in their base. Then they will conquer up to 7, discarding the other Treasure Hunter and drawing 1 into a hideable card, in which they will recycle 1 purple in order to hide the pike returned at the Star Spring, and they will pass. It is now the Jinx's turn. They draw an additional card for the trigger of the Jinx ability. They will now expend 1 seal in order to play their 3rd seal this game. Then for 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1 energy, they will be playing Rek'Sai Breacher Accelerated. This is going to be a really fascinating series of events. They will be playing moving Rek'Sai Breacher over to this battlefield. Because it has Assault, it goes up to 4 against the 1. The Kha'Zix has no response, and as such will die. The Conquer point will go on the chain. The Jinx will now discard 1 and draw 1, but they are going to discard Flame Trumpets, which has the ability, when you discard me, you may pay 1 rune in order to play me. Because it will be being played from anywhere besides hand, because it now exists between the two, it will enter ready, because Rek'Sai Breacher's ability says friendly units played from anywhere other than a player's hand have Accelerate. This was a slight misplay, and so we're going to assume that I did it in this order. The Conquer ability will first put on the chain Super Mega Death Rocket, and they will discard the Flaming Chompers for the trigger of this, meaning that this is now in hand. Then they will do the Zorn Warren's trigger of the discard draw, but the Jinx Super Mega Death Rocket does not exist in hand. Well, actually, no, it does. Unfortunately, it does mean that the Jinx Super Mega Death Rocket is unfortunately discarded and drawn, because while it was not in existence during the time, it was in hand at the time of the Zorn Warren's trigger effect on the chain. That's unfortunate for the Jinx in that regard, because that would have been very nice. A nice way to stop them from losing this game. The 2, the Punching Power comes out. The Flame Chompers, unfortunately, will move in as a 3 against their known 4 and die. And the Jinx just has to pass turn, and the Kha'Zix scores up to 8. That is a really unfortunate way to lose that game, but it is what it is. We will now move over to the mulligan stage of the 2nd game, and let's have a look at the sideboards. For the Jinx, they've got Gear Kill, Spell Counter, Return Units, Gear Kill, and countering essentially green decks, and a few blues. The Kha'Zix does not provide any reason to insert any card except the Star-Crossed here, which they will insert both. And we will see, because we'll be going first, we're going to reduce 1 Seal of Rage and 1 Wind and Ghosts. We'll see a Minefield played 2nd game. As for the Kha'Zix, not many spells. Not many single target spells except for the Super Mega Death Rocket, so that might be worth. The only gear we saw were seals, so that's pointless. And Cannon Shuriken Storm would be really cool if... Actually, we will, because there's a few spells that would have been really nice to be able to play from hand. So we'll insert 2 cannons, and we will sideboard out 2 Treasure Hunters, and we will choose our 2nd battlefield to be Forbidding Waste. the Jinx will choose to go first, and the mulligan stage will show the Kha'Zix one too many cats, and they will draw into a fizz. And for the Jinx, that's a pretty good opening hand. And we will now move over to the spectators screen, where Jinx will for 2 play out a Travelling Merchant and pass. The Kha'Zix will tap 3, recycle 1 in order to play out either. They've got the choice between the Nidalee and the Fiora. They're going to play out the Fiora because the Nidalee can be played at ambush. As such, they will pass turn, and the Travelling Merchant will move to the Minefield, first triggering the move ability, allowing them to discard and draw. And the Kha'Zix is tapped out, and as such the Jinx will score to 1, and as such they will also have to discard the top 2 cards of their main deck to the trash, that being 1 Seal and 1 Star-Crossed, which does hurt. The last thing that they will do is for 2 more, they will play out a Treasure Hunter, and they will pass. It is now the Kha'Zix's turn, and they're currently eyeing up the fact that their Fiora is a 3 might, but if they were to attack into this battlefield, would move up to 6 might. As such, there is not much need of the Grim Resolve in their hand. So, on the movement of the Fiora, they will have no triggerable effects, and it is worth noting for the purpose of the chain that a movement into a battlefield, unless there is a trigger that occurs a chain, does not create a chainable event for the opponent to respond to. And so while they may be able to initially have gusted, the fact that they Fiora moved into the battlefield does not create a moment for the chain, but instead, at the moment, the Fiora is designated as an attacker or defender. That creates a moment for the chain. So we have to figure out, based on the wording, whether or not the Fiora would be, at the moment of designation, gustable, which requires the unit to be at 3 or less might. This specifies that before spells and abilities resolve. This says when I attack or defend on 1-on-1, double my might this combat. As such, this becomes a moment in the chain. And then the second moment, the Jinx will play Gust. Because before the ability of the Fiora resolves, they are less than 3 might. And the Gust will resolve prior to the existence of the Fiora's doubling the might. In response, for 1, 2, 3, the Fiora will be playing Nidalee Ambush to the battlefield, which has reaction speed, which can be played before spells and abilities resolve. Because the Fiora is at the battlefield, this gives the Nidalee validity in their movement, or their play to the battlefield. So the Nidalee's introduction into the battlefield will resolve. The Gust will then trigger, and the Fiora will be moved back to hand. And then the Fiora is no longer on the chain, or no longer at the battlefield, and therefore fizzles. However, unfortunately for the Jinx, they have now introduced a much bigger issue, which is there is a Nidalee there, which cannot be gusted, and they no longer have their runes in order to play Ride the Wind. In this circumstance for them, the Travelling Merchant will die, and the Nidalee will choose to draw one. Oh, sorry, the Kha'Zix will choose to draw one for the Nidalee, then score a point, and then trigger Minefield, putting the top 2 cards of their main deck to the trash, which just happens to be the Cannon and a Fiora. Seeing the Cannon gone is a shame, because that would be a very strong counter to Minefield, but it's not the end of the world. Now, for the end of it, because they want to combat, they get 1 experience, which will make red, because it makes it a bit tidier. They get 1 experience, and they could, if they wish, to buff the Nidalee, and they will do so. The Nidalee is now a 5 might unit, which is perfect if the opponent had a Super Mega Death Rocket. But that is that would have been happening regardless if it was buffed or not. This just provides extra protection, I guess you'd say. The Jinx draws into Perfect Execution, which says ready a unit and give it Assault 3 this turn. They could turn this Treasure Hunter into a 4 Might, which would have actually been able to trade with Italy. But in my defense, the Jinx did not have perfect execution in our hand, so I did not know that was a thing. And so I pleaded innocence on that one. They could, however, play the Z this turn and ride the wind in the Shadow Clone and the Treasure Hunter. But that seems like a very expensive amount of cards in favor of the one rune, most likely Gust, because we saw a lot of Gusts out of the Kha'Zix last game too. As such, the Jinx will move the Treasure Hunter over to the battlefield, create a gold on the movement ability, and they will score 2/2 for the Conquering of Forbidding Waste. Then, for 1, 2, 3, 4, recycle one, they will be playing Z from the Shadows, and they will choose to, as the additional cost, discard one card to play, and they will be discarding Perfect Execution in order to create a Shadow Clone to the base. And then for one rune, they will be playing Gust on their own Treasure Hunter. Actually, they're going to ride the wind, their Treasure Hunter, back to base, which will make another gold, readying it, and then they'll move the Treasure Hunter again, creating another gold. Why did we do that? Well, it's because we want to have the Jinx Loose Cannons trigger, like the beginning phase ability trigger. And gusting the unit, I realized, would just put it into hand, swapping the position of the gust. This way we also create an additional 2 gold, which is pretty good, effectively, neutralizing the energy, the power cost of doing that in the first place. It is now the Kha'Zix's turn. They will score to 2 for holding with the Nidalee, and then they have access to a Rangar Trophy Hunter if they wish to fight the Jinx at this stage, and they would be able to make their Rangar a 7, but also the Forbidding Waste would make it a 2 on defense, and with no way to protect the Rangar on the movement of the Shadow Clone alone, there's not much point for them to do so. So instead, what they will do is they will, for 1, 2, 3, and a body rune, they will bring out Fiora Peerless again. And then they will move the Nidalee back to base, and they will pass. The Jinx will now draw one for the having one less card in their hand, and they draw into the Super Mega Death Rocket, which is quite scary. The Jinx will score 1 point for holding with the Treasure Hunter, who will now move back to base, creating another gold. Then they move the Shadow Clone over to this battlefield. It goes to 4 Might, and the Kha'Zix responds with nothing. They will now conquer and discard the top 2 cards of their main deck. So they go to 4, and then they get rid of a Rek'Sai Breacher and another Perfect Execution. That is quite unfortunate, but maybe there's some strategy here. Then, for 1, 2, 3, 4, and a gold, they play out Super Mega Death Rocket targeting the Nidalee. The Kha'Zix has a response opportunity of the Hard Bargain. They could Hard Bargain the Jinx, forcing them to expend all runes, meaning that they cannot respond to the Kha'Zix on their next turn, and that is exactly what they'll do. If they had an additional rune, they could have completely nullified the existence of Super Mega Death Rocket, but now they put the Jinx in a very awkward position of would they rather have the 2 runes, or would they rather have the Nidalee killed? And they would rather have the Nidalee killed, so they'll spend the last 2 runes, and the Nidalee will die. Now that the Jinx is completely tapped out, they must pass their turn with 2 cards in hand, which means they don't get the loose cannon trigger, and it is what it is. For the fun, they will now move their Fiora over to this battlefield and score to 3. They will then, for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, recycle 1, play out Rangar Trophy Hunter to the Shadow Clone's battlefield, who is currently a 0 Might. The Shadow Clone will disappear. The Kha'Zix will score to 4 because they want to combat. They will score an experience as well. and then they will discard the top 2 cards of their main deck, seeing gone by a Spoils of War and an Irresistible Faefolk. While the Spoils of War in this situation would be very tempting, because they killed the Shadow Clone, having the runes for a Grim Resolve on the defense of the Fura would be very powerful. It's important to note that the Fura Peerless is a on attack or defense, then double, so they cannot play Grim Resolve gaining 6 might. It would double the moment they are designated as attack and defend. It is also worth noting that the Forbidding Waste trigger is when the unit is defending here, but because it is a defending trigger, and they occur at the same time as the Fura Peerless, the controller or the decider of these 2 triggers gets to decide their order. So rather than it being a -2 then doubled, they can double and then -2. While some people would say that's incorrect because they would like it to be the other way, the way that the chain works is when 2 things occur at the same moment, the controller of those 2 things, or in this case, the defender, gets to decide their ordering. If this said, when a unit is attacking alone, then the attacker gets to decide the order of the 2 triggers. Or if they said, when a unit moves into this location alone, then that would be on movement, and that would be on the unit's movement controller. And then things such as Traveling Merchant or Treasure Hunter, which have move triggers, would be able to decide the order in that circumstance. Much in the same way that the controller of a conquering battlefield can decide the order in which they wish to resolve the conquer. These are just some very helpful tips for the next time you play and have a question about the chain of command when it comes to these types of things. Now that the Kha'Zix has conquered their battlefield, discarded 2 cards, and have 2 cards remaining, they will pass. It is now the Jinx's turn, and they will begin by, for 1, 2, 3, and 1 gold, playing Star-Crossed and targeting the Rangar Trophy Hunter and their Treasure Hunter. The Treasure Hunter will go back to hand, the Rangar Trophy Hunter will go back to hand. Then the Zed will move over to this battlefield. They will then conquer to 5. They will discard 2 cards, and they will actually discard it into a second Super Mega Death Rocket. But much like with the need of the cards existing in order to be able to discard, you need to have the unit in the trash in order to put it on the chain. As such, in response, we will now see the discard of the Treasure Hunter in order to return the Super Mega Death Rocket to hand. And for 1, 2, 3, 4, and a gold, we will see that Super Mega Death Rocket used to kill the Fura Peerless. There is no response available to the opponent, and as such, the Fura is dead. And for their last rune, the Jinx will pass. The Kha'Zix is wondering why did they return the Rangar to their hand, knowing that they can just play it back to this battlefield, but do not ask questions that they do not want the answer to. So for 5, recycle 1, they play the Rangar to this battlefield, and unfortunately for the Jinx, they did forget about that and will die. The Rangar will conquer, gaining 1 experience and 1 point, and they must discard the top 2 cards of their hand, seeing a Gust and a Nidalee gone with it. We've now seen 2 Nidalees go away. With 3 runes remaining, we're going to see, for 1, 2, 3, recycle 1, a Fizz played to base, and they're going to choose to play Spoils of War, because an enemy had died this turn. Oh, sorry, actually they cannot play Spoils of War because the enemy, that card costs more than 4, even though on the chain it would not. As such, there's nothing that the Fizz would like to play, and as such, instead, because I can't count, they will play the Spoils of War from hand instead, drawing 2 into an Irresistible Faefolk and their third Grim Resolve, passing the turn. It is now the Jinx's turn, and for 1, 2, 3, 4, they will be playing out a Zed. He paid the gold in order to play out the cost, and then they'll be discarding a Traveling Merchant in order to create a Shadow Clone to base. Then for 1, 2, 3, recycle 1, They'll be playing Jinx Loose Cannon, which says when you play me discard 2, they'll be discarding the Gust and... Oh, not drawing, sorry. And they will be paying the additional cost in order to have her accelerated. She will have 6 might on accelerate, which is exactly the amount that the opponent has, and so she'll be moving in order to trade, which is exactly what will happen. They will then pass the turn over to the Kha'Zix, who draws Kha'Zix Mutating Horror. For 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, recycle 1 orange, they'll be playing out Kha'Zix Evolving Hunter, which has the ability Hunt, which is when you hold or conquer, you gain 1 experience, and when I attack, you may spend 3 experience to deal damage equal to my might to an enemy unit here. The last 3 runes we are going to see for 2. The Irresistible Feyfolk played to base. Irresistible Feyfolk has, when I move to a battlefield, you may move an enemy unit to that battlefield. It should go on to further designate that in that situation, the opponent would be the defender, I believe. They pass over to the Jinx, who draws an additional card for the Loose Cannon. They draw into Rek'Sai Breacher. The Jinx will move the Shadow Clone over to the Minefield, scoring it to 6 and milling the top 2 cards, which is a Ride the Wind and a Noxus Hopeful. Then for 1, 2, 3, they'll be playing out Rek'Sai Breacher, and then for 2 more, they'll be playing Punching Poro. While they could now conquer the Forbidding Waste, there's no real reason because they're more interested in going for a 2-point conquer next turn. It is now the Kha'Zix's turn, who realizes this is the strategy, and what they will do is do everything they can in their power to stop it. So what they're going to do first is they're going to move the Irresistible Feyfolk over to this battlefield. On the move trigger, they'll be bringing in the Zed evolving from the shadows, and the move resolves, now designating them as the attacker and these 2 units as the defender. Because it is priority of the Kha'Zix, what they will begin with is for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and recycle 1. They'll be playing Rangar Trophy Hunter to this battlefield, 7 might to 4 might. It is worth noting that the Shadow Clone is 0 because it's only on attack, they gain +4. They realise the Jinx has no cards in hand, and there is no reason for them to play a Grim Resolve at this stage. As such, the Zed will choose to kill the Irresistible Feyfolk because while they have 4, they cannot kill a 6. The Irresistible Feyfolk will die, but the Jinx will lose those 2 units. Their Rangar will score to 6 and discard the top 2 cards of their main deck, seeing gone a Hard Bargain and a Treasure Hunter. With their remaining 4 runes, they will move the Kha'Zix Evolving Hunter over to the Forbidding Waste and score to 7. And, sorry, I forgot to mention they also get 1 experience for the combat win. So they're at 3 now. The Kha'Zix is going to pass over to the Jinx, who is going to draw 2 cards. And so for 1, 2, 3, 4 and a recycle, they're going to play Zed from the Shadows. Zed will now trigger their discard ability, which will occur on the Flame Chompers, which, if we remember, means that when that is discarded, they may pay 1 power in order to play me. Because the Rek'Sai Breacher is on the battlefield, that will come in ready. Furthermore, because they discarded with Zed Shadows, they create a Shadow Clone, which enters ready because it was played from anywhere besides hand. Sorry, I should specify it's accelerate, so we do have to pay 1 red, pay 1 power, 1 energy to have these 2 enter, I believe. Let me double check that. There we go. So, sorry, I had to confirm. It is, because it's accelerate, it is 1 energy in the power domain of the card in question. So because this is a Flame Chompers, it'll be 1 red recycle 1. And because the Shadow Clone does not have a domain, it will be 1 energy and 1 neutral power, which will just be the purple in this case. The Z, however, will not be accelerated. Then what will happen is the Shadow Clone for 4 and the Flame Chompers for 3 will move into this battlefield. There are no move triggers, but there is now an attack and defense. The Kha'Zix will now lose 2 might because of the Forbidding Waste, going to 3. And there is 7 might at this side and 3 might over here. The Jinx has no alternatives, so they must pass priority over to the Kha'Zix, who will tap 2 in order to play Grim Resolve. Grim Resolve will give them 3 in additional might this turn, and when it wins a combat, gain 2 experience. This will move the Kha'Zix up to 6. The alternative was the Kha'Zix mutating Horror, however, as a 4 might, it would have just been just enough. So instead what they're going for is 2 triggers of Grim Resolve, bringing the Kha'Zix up to 9, and it will also mean that that will stay at 9, meaning that the alternative, because the Kha'Zix is at 7 points, they must clear both battlefields. That is no longer an option. There was only 6 available here, which was perfect for this. But it is what it is. That will resolve, and unfortunately that will kill both of these. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The Kha'Zix will gain 5 experience because 2 for each Grim Resolve and 1 for winning combat. Doesn't matter because that is no longer on the chain, and the Jinx can't do anything more because they move over here. Their Rankar dies, they score 2-7, and they discard the top 2 cards. They discard a Flame Chompers, and what they will do is, because that was when it discarded, they will play that and accelerate it. And the funny thing is that really would have made the difference is if they had changed the order in which they did that. Actually, it wouldn't have, because the Flame Chompers, the Rek'Sai, and the Punching Poro would be dead, because it was a 6-6 over this battlefield. So, on review, I really like the what the Kha'Zix had going on for itself. It had a lot of access to utility cards. The ambush was really nice. We didn't see anything from the Renekton or any like Elder Cannon, so that was a bit of a shame. I'm sure if this went to a game 3, maybe we would have. But on the Jinx's side, I really like what they were going for here. It was a really fascinating combination of synergies such as Flame Chompers, Rek'Sai, from the Shadows, token creation, and many ways to get rid of cards to continuously use the Jinx Legend ability, which many people have to often forego because there's not enough ways to get rid of cards. What I'd like to see from this deck, probably a little more flow. The existence of Cannon, Storm of the Shuriken, the purple cannon, being able to burn, it feeds into this idea of Jinx wants to see a lot of cards in her trash. She doesn't want a lot of cards in her hand. And I think there's a world in which Endless Riches, which actually, if we go back to this screen, and I very quickly, let's see if I can find it. Oops, sorry for the noise on that one. Good listening. If I quickly pull this up, yep, Endless Riches says when you play this, banish your hand in trash and then burn 7. Skip your draw phase. With Jinx, you still get the +1 draw, so I think that there is a world in which Endless Riches works very nicely, paired with cards such as Cannon, Storm of the Shuriken. which are, it says, burn 2 cards, and then when you conquer, you may play a spell from your trash with flow. The existence of Rek'Sai Breacher should be also really fascinating. But anyway, I hope this has been. There we go. I hope this has been really fascinating for you. I hope that this inspired you to try either of these decks, either the Jinx or the Kha'Zix. As I said, I'll link those in the description below. Otherwise, feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next random.